Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Racing Productions MC and producer. And welcome to the Team Racing YouTube channel, Brandon and Zach from the band Fellowcraft. Welcome.
Hello there.
Hello. Good to see you.
Awesome. Thanks. It's great to see you too. How are you?
We're doing fantastic. Fun. You know, as best as we can be here as we're entering the summer months. Can't wait.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to have you both here with us. It's great to, chat and, get into Fellowcraft. So actually what I want to start out with is I want each of you to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about your background and experience and tell me how you first met each other and how the band formed.
Zach, I'll let you start off with that.
Sure. So it's great to be here, Krylios. Thank you for having us. So Zach Martin, I've been playing drums, I don't know, since 5th grade. You know, I started on just the single snare, learning my rudiments and all that stuff and playing in the bands, worked my way up through pep band and all that fun stuff. But wasn't strong enough to play in college. But then once I finally moved to DC, there's a wonderful group called Flash Band, where it's basically like speed dating with a bunch of other musicians. And you go
to Miles Ryan and Seven Drum on First Capitol.
Exactly. It's Seven Drum City, which is a wonderful place to meet other musicians and to practice. And basically drummers and singers and violinists and pianists and bass players get into all these rooms and they practice together and play these songs. And that's where I went out and met a lot of DC musicians during that time and rekindled sort of playing live and playing the drums. So that's where I just kicked off, sort of my DC music experience. Joined a couple bands along the way, and I met Brandon a few years after that. So that's kind of how I started in DC.
Awesome.
Yeah, and on my side, I was a huge band geek. I played tuba, euphonium, trombone, brass instruments. Shout out my band geeks out there. But never really anything in the bass past, some jazz band for games and that sort of thing. But did musical theater all throughout college and after college. Shout out Virginia Musical Theater Company down in Virginia Beach. But when I moved to DC, I missed that so much that I joined a group called District Karaoke. Jesse Rosh started and met a lot of great singers and also other musicians there. And one of them turned me on to this group that was looking for a bass player. And that was in 2015 or 2016, in the summer of 2016, when I joined up with Fellowcraft. Before that, I hadn't really played rock and roll, much less progressive metal, as I believe where we landed here. So that's how I met Zach, as he came into the group a couple of years after, and the rest is history, as they say.
Awesome. So tell me, what's the DC music scene like, and how did you find your space in it and kind of work out where you wanted to be as a part of the DC music community? Talk to me about that and, finding your legs in the DC music scene.
Absolutely. So DC has a great group of venues that are willing to host up and starter bands. I mean, I remember some of these don't exist anymore, unfortunately, but some do. So some of my first shows was at the Pinch, Velvet Lounge, of course, and then you kind of the Treehouse Lounge, which was
Acre
on the
121
end of H Street.
Near Luz. Luz is still up and running, but Acre 121 is out.
Yeah, exactly. So some of these, that's kind of where we got our feet wet, and maybe 6 people would come, maybe 10 people, eventually 20 or 30 people would kind of join up. But the most fun was joining other bands. I mean, we played with like Oh He Dead way back in the day at Treehouse Lounge, and they have exploded into this wonderful band now that's doing great things. So it's so fun to say, we were working with these bands when we first started, and we all kind of started at these venues who are willing to give us a shot.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the other bands in the scene also really help each other. So, when we put together local bills, we'll invite other groups we know and have met and have worked with, and they'll do the same for us. So, we also have to do the cover scene for enough shows to kind of build momentum as a band. And early on, we were doing a lot of those cover shows, but then we got invited to The Sound on DC Public Television. And that was such a great experience. And to be offered a chance to do that and have the TV cameras that swivel on the massive, the massive cranes that they have there. So it's part and parcel the people in the city and how they introduce you to different venues, because you might start at some of those places, and then you step into. I mean, Roofers Union is also a good cover gig spot, by the way. But then you step into DC9, and you get opportunities to play Union Stage or Pearl Street Warehouse now, and you just really have to build on going out and asking if you can play, and then performing well.
Awesome. I like that. And there are other people in the band, so I want you to talk about them as well. And tell me about the name too, Fellowcraft, how y'all came up with that.
Sure. So I'll go first if you want to hit. I'll hit Pablo first, and Brandon's known JR for quite some time. So Pablo and I met in Flash Band, which I talked about earlier. And so we had a band called 100th Nomad, which we were in for about 2 or 3 years. And he's a phenomenal guitarist. And we went our separate ways for a year or two, and then we kind of rejoined together pretty much the same time as Fellowcraft, as they were looking for both another guitarist and a drummer. And so we were lucky enough to audition and join the band. But the band goes way back before me and Pablo joining, and Brandon was one of the originals.
Yeah, and we started with Brian Nelson Palmer, and JR actually started before bringing me on board. And they played a little bit. Matt Feebles, who is an amazing bassist and plays with a couple of other bands. Higher Numbers, shout out. They're doing really well. And so I kind of found them through another contact, another DC musician, Mary Jo Matea, Johnny Graves, shout out to both of those phenomenal musicians. And that's when I came in 2016, but J.R. McDonald, actually our front man, lead singer, rhythm guitarist, founded the band and is a Mason along with Brian Nelson Palmer. Brian Nelson Palmer also started DC Music Rocks way back, which is why we got to play, one of the reasons we played 930 Club, and has been a tremendous member in the scene, helping with the Whammies now still. But yeah, JR started everything back in the day, and does all the lyrics and all the phenomenal sort of poetry that you hear in our songs.
Awesome. And speaking of the poetry and the lyrics, tell me what kind of themes as a band you like to explore when it comes to your music, what kind of topics you usually lean into, and the kind of vibe you're trying to get the audience to get into.
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe I'll start, and then Zach, you can punch in here. We have over the years talked about gun regulation and proliferation nation. That's an important. Our founder JR was in the Air Force and then FBI and now GSA. It's a long history of having strong feelings toward how we as a nation can be better about that gun control. And then we talk about various issues. I think earlier we maybe, as all people do, wrote songs about loss and significant others and that sort of thing. But now, with the last couple of years, it's kind of trended into, some territory about evaluating how we spend our days. Are we scrolling through this infinite abyss, or are we, out, being, trying to be healthy, in our own lives? I don't know, Zach, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think, a lot of us being in DC, follow current events, as much as anyone in the city and around the area. So we're very passionate about what he said. Gun control, Black Lives Matter movement is big. And a lot of these issues really inspire us that we see every day. And I know JR, he writes all the lyrics and he writes the message. And he, I always thought he has sort of a philosophical background too, the way he approaches these problems as well and writes it in a unique way.
He's like, this is from Keats. Are you familiar? We're like,
it's been a long time since I tried to read any of that stuff. But and he does a great job, and he really inspires the message. And you also asked about the sound, and I think it's kind of fun because you have the rhythm section here, which is pretty unique. I think Brandon has a really unique style where he's able to have these beautiful, like, higher end note trills that he writes that you'll hear it throughout a lot of our different songs. So me and him try to match up a lot on punching, either me backing off and letting the bass kind of sing, or punching together some of these harder riffs. Like one song in particular, Coyote and the Desert Rose, you will hear me and Brandon sort of matching with the guitar and hitting it very heavy during a lot of the verses. And then the chorus, we kind of separate into kind of a bigger sound, and we kind of go in and out in that way. So it's been great because me and Brandon over the years have become quite close. And I think that really helps playing music as well. If you're also really great friends and know a lot about each other, that goes a long way writing as well.
I'm sure.
It helps you arrange the songs because, as Zach mentioned, JR early on, because we didn't have a lead guitarist until, a couple years in, he would ask me to kind of take over. So I would start playing like riffs with my right hand while playing the bass note with my left hand. And he just gave me tremendous explore the studio space sort of energy. And like Zach said, he and I sync up on a lot of things and are, best of friends outside of playing music within the group, which really helps with the dynamics and helps everyone gel.
Certainly. And I know the band has won awards, been finalists, for the Whammies, stuff like that. There we go. Awesome. What does that, positive feedback and validation, what does it feel like, and how does it influence or impact your next project?
That's a really great question. I'll say the first Whammy Brian has that one. I can't show it. It was a glass one. Was a very bass heavy song that was influenced by the Red Hot Chili Peppers that most of the hook I wrote. And it was validating for me because it was kind of like, I play for people, but there's always a level of humility that you have to have. And then maybe some insecurity that you have on top of that. You're nervous. You're not sure if people are picking up what you're putting down. And that was kind of like, this is actually more generally liked than just, my friends and family. There are other people out there who are like, that's a good tune. And I don't know, Zach, how'd you feel about the last Whammy win here for Best Rock Artist Group, which was just a phenomenal honor?
Well, it was great to be just nominated and to kind of stand up there with a bunch of other great bands that we have played with. I know Elizabeth II did very well and won awards too, and Cat Janice and some others that we've stood with. And I think it's just a sign that, the grind does have, grinding and playing a lot of shows and having friends come out and support you. This is kind of the DC scene, just saying, hey, we hear you, we know what you guys are doing, and I think we're headed in the right direction in that respect. But honestly, it's a wonderful award and recognition that I think a lot of bands certainly deserve. I think that we're lucky enough to have won, but a lot of them deserve it.
Yeah, sure. Certainly. And you talk about performing and being on stage, and I'm sure when the pandemic came around, that changed a whole lot. So what was that like for you, and how has it been now, transitioning out of that and getting back on stage, as the pandemic kind of winds down, hopefully, as we're seeing now? How was that for you?
It's a good question. Yeah.
Go ahead, Brandon. Yeah. The
Zach actually just before this reminded me of a DC9 show we had, and we all love DC9. Great space where my company was having a meeting, and they were basically like, after the last activity, they said, we'll just see if anybody wants to go to the show. Probably 65, 70 people from my company showed up in a tour bus, and it was one of the most fun times I have ever had on stage. Fast forward a year and year and a half, and we're doing a live stream in front of 3 cameras and 2 the owner and a person running tech. It was a much different atmosphere, and we had to feed off of each other. And Zach had just reminded me about that story. I don't know if you had anything to add on to that, Zach.
Well, I think, Krylios, at the end of the day, what I've really found from that is bands feed off the energy of the crowd just as much as the crowd does from the band. And I think that was really apparent in those 2 shows where it was Brandon's coworkers chanting his name as opposed to, sort of an empty room. Still, you got to bring it no matter who's there, of course.
Yeah.
But I think that was very prevalent. And I think that's the challenge a lot of bands face, not only the creative hurdles from maybe being separated from your bandmates, but also being separated from the crowd. can, pose a challenge as far as motivations, and sort of keeping that energy going. I would say from a personal note, maybe a lot of drummers may agree with this, but the drummers really got to bring the energy into the songs and the energy out into the crowd. And I feel like that's really tough to go full out when there's no one in the audience. Now, but we've learned early on, when there are 5 people in the audience, you gotta, you bring it no matter who's there. So that also
we'll take
too.
5 really enthusiastic people though.
Yes.
But my buddy Seth actually just said last night, we were having a chat. He's a bass guitar player, played with Mr. Blonde and a number of other bands around the scene. Black Dog Prowl, he played bass there, actually with Pablo. And he mentioned that the audience is kind of like another instrument. He's like, I was like, so you have to play the audience too a little bit, like, bring them in, help them feel what you're feeling, because at the core, we love playing this music, and we have rocked out harder in a rehearsal space than some of our shows because we also like the music. But playing the crowd can also mean that you have both parties have a better experience.
Oh, wow. Tell me, what are you looking forward to this year, 2022? What, as a band, what are you looking forward to this year? What are you excited about? Tell me about it.
Yeah, we're going to Austin next week to play a show, which our couple of the band members have moved. I since have moved from DC to Minnesota, and Pablo has since moved from DC to Texas. But we're still keeping the group together because we can visit venues in Texas and Minnesota and DC, come back, and we know our stuff quite well. So I'm looking forward to getting back on stage, which has been kind of a while. It's been more sparse, I think, in the last 2 years than it ever has. And playing live again. I think just that by itself is what I'm looking forward to. We have a couple fun trips planned through this year. Mexico is in the works for later in the year. It was
international.
Exactly, yeah. We've played there twice. We're lucky enough to play Mexico twice. They've invited us back. And so we're really excited to join those bands down there as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything, Brandon?
Well, Zach mentioned Mexico, and I gotta say, 930 Club has been near and dear to my heart ever since I was too nervous to even go to shows there as a teenager living in rural Virginia. But we got to play the equivalent of, it's like a between 930 Club and Anthem down in Mexico City, El Plaza Condesa. And that was such a phenomenal experience. Kubo, a band that's well known in that area, brought us down. And that was just a phenomenal experience. And I think it followed a Union stage gig with Kat Janis and Elizabeth II that we had such a great run leading up through the end of 2019. Beginning of 2020, we played Philadelphia, we played DC again, and then went down to Mexico again. And Zach, if you can talk about Hell in Heaven, that's, I think, one of the best international trips that Fellowcraft has experienced.
That was a very interesting time. That was almost exactly 2 years ago. I remember, we got invited down there, and COVID was just hitting the US, and it hadn't spread to Mexico, Central America, and South America yet. But we were debating whether this could even happen. And Sum 41 was one of the big headliners, and they had to cancel last second. And a few other bands as well.
On the same stage, yeah.
Yeah, on the same stage we were going to play. And it was a very uncertain time. This is before, COVID, really hit the United States too. But we were lucky enough to go down there before COVID seriously hit. And basically got to just play the biggest stage I've ever seen, let alone played on, where it had these giant double stacks, 20 feet high on either side of me. And as we were kind of warming up for a quick second, right before we're about to play, I remember I just hit the kick drum once to test the sound, and this giant boom launched into the crowd, and you could hear it kind of reflect off these mountains.
Wow.
It was like, oh shit, this is. Well, number one, if I mess up, everyone's going to hear it. And number two, this is the real deal. We gotta bring the heat. So we're lucky enough that we did, and we flew back on Sunday, and on Monday, that's when offices started to say, stay at home. We made it back within about 7 hours of it shutting down. So
yeah, Mayor Bowser shut everything down right then.
Wow. So that was a tremendous experience, and we snuck in at the last second to play it. So we're really looking forward to going back.
Awesome, awesome. Well, how can people, pick up your music, listen to everything Fellowcraft has to offer, follow, keep up, support in any way? How are they able to do that?
Well, Fellowcraftband.com has everything, including, we have a couple of music videos out there. Carter Lou, shout out to him. DC Plaza Condesa, that's the cover of our last album there. But yeah, Fellowcraftband.com is the best place. We're on Facebook and Instagram, that Fellowcraft Band, because Fellowcraft is associated with the Masons. It's also a really cool term, and that is the stage that Zach's talking about right there.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and then,
tiny on that thing.
But if you look for Fellowcraft on Spotify, we really love to see people going out there and engaging, enjoying our music, looking at the followers and listeners to see where they are and where we might want to go for a tour next.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we are going to have those links in the description below so everyone can go ahead, check them out, pick up some music, and, find out and keep up with everything that Fellowcraft has to offer. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Brandon. Thanks for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure. And I hope I get to come and catch a show soon and see you live with my own eyes and hear you with my own ears. I look forward to that. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Those watching, please follow Team Racine Productions at Team Racine on all forms of social media. Like, comment, and subscribe. But most of all, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.